let's unpack local market movements on the day, and taking a look at some of the factors driving share prices is Independent Analyst Ian Cruikshanks. Ian, it's good to have you with us, and Happy New Year to you.
Samantha.
So, of course, it was affirmed today that Mark Yusufani takes over, and we saw the reaction from the market today. Anglo-American third best performer on the top 40 today. What did you make of Cobus Snell's comments about the fact that relative to peers like Goldfields and Harmonies, costs in fact at Anglo Gold Ashanti have in fact been increasing, and you've also had the grades starting to deplete. Do you think that there's anything you can really tie to the likes of Mark Yusufani as the CEO there?
It may be part of their strategy. Anglo-American divested themselves of all of their lower grade, shorter life, high cost mines a long time ago, and that was a very good move. But that meant that when the gold price went up, they weren't able to gear up to the same extent, and as the price moved up, it wasn't that same gearing ratio, and I think that may have had something to do about it, that maybe there were more expectations than there should have been. But I think what they have confirmed is they're in gold mining for the long term at good margins.
I mean, it's interesting, a number of the new projects that are coming online at Anglo Gold Ashanti. I mentioned Tropicana in Australia, you've got Mungwalu, you've got Kabali, La Colosa over in America. So there's a number of new projects, and it's at an interesting time where that gold price is starting to struggle, and we're not seeing it going to $2,000 an ounce. It's kind of still below $1,700 an ounce. What does this all mean for the likes of Anglo Gold Ashanti with all this new production coming online?
Well, it doesn't look as though it's going to be going back to $2,000 or towards $2,000 again, but I suspect that it's actually in a range, maybe the $1,500 to $1,700 range just for the time being, and that's pretty healthy. Don't forget, during the previous decade it came from 250 all the way up to 1900. That was a massive run, and but I think now we've got a sideways movement more likely to develop, and that's better for planning as well.
So what do you make of the shifts in Anglo-American right now, and the changes that are likely to come through? Are you expecting a lot from Yusufani?
Well, I think one must. It's a big position. It really is. And very diverse assets. Okay, all in the mining sector. But what is interesting is here we have Mark Yusufani with international experience. And I think that is interesting over a diversity of minerals. He hasn't just been a gold miner. And I think that that's important because it means that he will have the experience to cope with all of these new projects that you just mentioned, spread over a wide geographic area. So it sounds like a good choice at a difficult time.
And of course the Brazilian project is the one that everyone's worried about with all the cost overruns, and Mark Yusufani coming through today and saying he has about 15 years association in inverted commas with Brazil, saying he's got a lot of experience and he understands that market, so allaying some of the fears that people have had about the fact that he hasn't had direct experience in the market.
As I said, he's got that diversity of experience, wide geographical base. It's just what they need at the moment, and that may be why there wasn't a move, despite certain shareholders and the government suggesting that a South African leader would be appropriate. They say the South African leaders may not have that sort of experience, and I think that's an interesting pointer to future direction of the big mining houses.
Overall, interesting to look on the day. Pretty mixed picture if you're looking at the resource sector. I mean, BHP Billiton down by 1 1/3%, while we had, of course, Anglo-American up, and then you've got Lonmin down, the likes of Kumba Iron Ore up by 7/10 today. So a mixed bag. Where do you stand on resources going into 2013? Are you sitting on the fence waiting to see what happens, or are you dipping your toes into resources?
No, one must have a view. I think that that's very important. I believe that we've seen the worst of the post-2009 recession. We saw a big recovery and then a leveling out, and that's where we are now. Yes, the US has slow growth, but it's positive growth, and it looks like it'll probably have ended up last year around about 2% or just over, and maybe do the same GDP growth this year. If we look at the EU, they're in recession, they're going to stay there, I'm afraid. But let's look at the growth centers. Let's look at China and the Southeastern Asian area. There's definitely a strong growth phase coming back there. China, after all, has leveled out, having come down from 11.5% GDP growth to 7.5%, now looking at over 8%. Would that we could get halfway there. I think that that's quite a positive move, and that is important for us on the resource development side, and maybe pulling our trade account back into some sort of balance.
And that, of course, very important for the rand. Just talking about the ECB and Europe's problems right now. You've got the ECB ECB meeting, policy meeting coming up on Thursday, and Spain announcing today is looking to raise around 121.3 billion euros this year. That's from their overall gross target for bond issuance, and that is up from last year. And that, of course, at a time when everyone's very stressed about the fact that Greece's fiscal problems are worsening, and of course questioning whether and if they're going to go to the ECB for a bailout. What are your thoughts on how this is all going to play out?
Starting with Greece, I was encouraged that Angela Merkel said that she was encouraged, that she thought that the Greeks were doing a decent job. Well, whether that's just public relations or not, I don't know. But that's a positive comment, and if she thinks they are, then hopefully Spain will follow a similar path. So I think it's affordable. I think it can be managed by the community. They will manage it, because one fall down out of a country the size of Spain will have an impact on the whole group.
Interesting, but at a time, of course, when Spain is sitting with bond yields which have come down quite substantially just from the mere utterance that the ECB is prepared to step in, and of course laying out the plans that they would use should they have to. I mean, their 10-year bond yield sitting at around 5.07% from that 6.7% that the market was frightened by back in July last year.
Once it gets over 6%, once it moves towards 7%, they say that is no longer sustainable. The cost of rolling over the debt cannot be afforded under present stretched budgets. So it has come back a bit. Maybe that means issuing new paper will be more acceptable, and I think the community as a whole will be supportive. The ECB, of course, will also be supportive. They will be taking up anything that remains in the market.
And you mentioned America, but arguably the most important event today is the US earnings season, which kicks off after the closing bell in the US. So we wake up to Alcoa's results tomorrow morning. What are your thoughts as to what we should be looking out for and how that might guide direction of the JSE, which is pretty much teetering at record levels?
Yes. Let's look at the US to start with. Alcoa, always the lead. I don't know how they do it every year reliably. They're the first major company to report. They had a good third quarter. It picked up quite a lot from the previous two mediocre quarters. So I think that if that continues, that's a good signal for going ahead. And we might then find that the whole gamut of the S&P 500 companies starts to see a little bit of a step up.
And of course, positive
I would expect that.
feed through into the market.
Sorry?
Positive feed through into the equity market as a whole, and of course supporting local equities.
Absolutely. I believe that is right. And I think that markets move in anticipation, and I think that's what we're seeing right now. So I don't expect it to be going another 200 points or anything like that on the S&P, but let's say it can move up to a higher level and sustain it.